Good morning, Galaxians, and welcome to another live edition of the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is Ryan, and I initially did not have anything specific planned to talk about today, but then eBay went and had a terrible, no good, very bad day yesterday. So we're actually going to start over there here in just a second. I'm going to hop into the chat and see if anybody's here and has said hello. Record Crate, hey, welcome. Thanks. Good to see you. To everybody else that's here, feel free to join in the chat as we do a little bit of reselling news.
News updates.
So over the last, 5-6 weeks, we've done a lot of talking about all of the things that were coming up, particularly on eBay, which had made a ton of announcements of things that were going to go into effect kind of worldwide. Some stuff going on in Germany, some stuff going on in the UK, here in the US, all kind of scheduled for February 4th, which, for those of you keeping score at home, was yesterday. And they had a really bad day. Most of it did not actually work. This is from Value Added Resource. I'd been following this kind of throughout the course of yesterday as things just continued to pile up. The buyer fee thing in the UK did not roll out. They've since made an update to that we'll start with here in a second. The pre-owned condition change also did not work. And apparently there was an update to the mobile app, which caused users on Android 10 or prior and a certain iOS version, which I don't remember off the top of my head, to not be able to get into the mobile app. So it was a rough day over at eBay. Let's get started here. The official support channel, Ask eBay, has confirmed that the launch of the buyer protection fee has been pushed back until February 6th. So those of you in the UK, if there are any of you here in the chat today, probably know that yesterday was the day that buyers were supposed to start paying fees, a buyer protection fee, on things that were purchased from private sellers. There's really been no explanation as to why this did not go live, but it did not. The launch of the buyer protection fee has been postponed until February 6th. There is a dedicated page, and of course, I will go back and link to this in the show notes and the video description down below for you if you want to go get more information. eBay had some ambitious plans for February 4th, but the execution and communication missteps have rained on their parade with a failure to launch those buyer fees, pre-owned conditions for clothing categories, and again, an app problem. This was supposed to, again, be the big day for those selling fees, which were supposed to make up for some of the money lost by doing fee-free selling for private sellers. They had said those would go into effect for all private sellers in all categories, excluding vehicles, classified ads, and property, beginning yesterday. In a last-minute shakeup, they announced that it would instead be a phased rollout starting only in electronics and then ultimately expanding to other categories in the following weeks. However, that didn't work either. It would appear no one has actually seen any evidence of buyer fees being charged, even on electronics. So this did not. There's a bunch of comments here from users who were trying to find these fees and could not. Again, support said it was only going to apply to new listings in electronics, then not existing ones. What a mess for eBay in the UK. And they're now saying this will roll out completely starting tomorrow on the 6th. So you can let me know about that. If that actually happens, we'll be keeping an eye on this. But so far, that one has not gone into place. eBay support seemed to be completely clueless about the change to a phased rollout, let alone the fact that they're not even being implied in the category known. That is not the first time that people have called eBay support or contacted eBay support and gotten conflicting information, or that the people on the support staff didn't know what's going on. In what was possibly related news, the eBay community forums were flooded with posts about problems with the latest updates to both iOS and Android apps. It seemed to be primarily impacting users in the UK. If you're a user here in the US on a really old mobile phone, let us know in the chat. Did you have a problem getting in to either iOS or Android with an old operating system on your phone? It could be that it was connected to this misguided launch of the buyer fees. And that may be why none of it was working. I don't know. A lot of times these companies do drop support for older versions of these operating systems because the manufacturers of the phones and the developers of the operating systems no longer provide security patches for those. So this is not super uncommon, but it caught everybody, of course, by surprise. eBay now has a lot of very upset UK users who are not reacting positively to suddenly being told they'll need to upgrade their mobile devices or use the web experience, and some of those buyers may simply choose to opt for using a different shopping app instead. UK private sellers were supposed to have their payments held until after delivery, starting February 4th as well, but it's not clear if that actually happened either amidst all the other chaos going on over there. There is an update. A private seller in the UK has confirmed they sold 2 items yesterday, which do not have the funds being held until after delivery. So it appears that also was not launched on time. eBay so far had not released any public announcements about this. They have obviously since corrected that. Finally, last bit of news. Sellers across eBay's US, UK, Canada, and German markets were supposed to see changes to clothing category conditions yesterday, adding in those new pre-owned options to better communicate item conditions to buyers. I just talked about this on Monday's episode as well, and that also failed to launch. When trying to edit existing listings or create new ones, sellers were stymied when they noticed the new pre-owned conditions are not yet available in the listing form. I didn't go in to look today. If you're a clothing seller, let me know. Has this been updated? It sounds like they have decided they're going to roll this out later, possibly mid-month. So, but given the problems with the rollout, who knows? But apparently you could not do this. These new ones were not there. Here you can see this is a screenshot somebody took, and it still showed the old new with tags, new without tags, new with defects, and used, not any of those new ones. Apparently, eBay did post a belated announcement saying they've decided to postpone the condition updates until mid-February. Pretty small here for me to try to read this. Our goal is to give you a seamless selling experience, so we're fine-tuning the new condition options rollout in order to be more efficient and beneficial to your business. With the new condition options, you'll be able to provide buyers with a clearer understanding of your item's condition, reducing the likelihood of returns due to condition-related issues, which is kind of what they've been saying about this all along. No indication from them whatsoever what may have in fact caused this delay. If it was a technical problem with, they've been talking about this for months, so it's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that this would have been a technical issue, but it is eBay, to be fair. So it may have actually been a technical issue. I don't know. It's a mess, needless to say. So anyway, let's get back here into the chat. Say some good mornings, Lord Jake Ryan. Let me do my magic here and blow this up so I can actually see who's talking to me. I really need to get my eyes checked and stop buying microphones and bikes. Somebody commented the other day on one of my videos, and they said, I have some concerns. First off, how many mics do you have? Too many. Too many. Media Picker, good morning. Thanks for coming out. Fern Flips, always a pleasure to see you. Michelle, hello. Thank you. Mary McQuain, pleasure to see you as always. Den Decor Depot says, good morning. In what was looking like a chaotic 2025, what are you personally doing to combat it? We're just pushing to put up as much as we can on all platforms that we can and hope we keep growth. And that, to be fair, that's something I talk about all the time here on this show. You can only control the things you can control. It's one of the reasons that when I talk about what I'm doing for a week, my listings is what I shoot for to talk about, because that's something I can control. I can't control how many people visit eBay. I can't control their technical issues. All I can really control are the things that I source, the things that I try to sell, the things that I list, my actual behaviors. And obviously continuing to put up as much stuff as you can and cross-list to as many platforms as you're comfortable with is probably one of the best ways to try to keep things moving in the right direction. Although, to be fair, February is off to a just terrible start. You can let me know in the chat what the first handful of days in February has looked like. All the traffic metrics on my dashboard look good, like impressions are good, clicks are good, but man, there is just very little activity going on over there. Big Dre, good morning. Coffee isn't waking me up today. Coffee had me like over the edge yesterday. I said yesterday in my Whatnot show last night, I tried to send a text to somebody in the morning and it had like 9 typos in it. 'Cause I was just wound up on the coffee. So I don't know what that was. Fern Flips, hopefully all those glitches explain the lack of sales yesterday. There you go. Unsolicited. Chimed right in. Yeah, yesterday was bad. I think I had just 6, which for me is a very, very slow day. Lord Jake Ryan, if eBay was on Press Your Luck, they would be saying no whammies, and then get nothing but whammies. Yeah. It's Liz pointed out in the article, and I didn't get that far down into it, but she did ask the question, and it's the topic I brought up, I think, in the last episode as well. It all starts to lend itself to an opinion that there is a leadership issue over there. They continue to roll out things that don't work, that they are unable for whatever reason to implement on time or in an effective way. And as we've talked about over the last month, all these kind of basic functions that are not working like they're supposed to. Like the mobile app currently has a thing where probably every other listing, when I put in a price and then go fill in my shipping details, it deletes my price. And I have to go back in and put the price in again. There are just lots of little technical problems. And that all goes back to, leadership at the technical level and at the global level. And you've got to wonder how much longer investors, big investors, are going to watch eBay in particular. But we talked about it a little bit with Etsy in the Monday show as well. Allow them to continue to struggle to maintain and operate their site, not be able to really grow gross merchandise volume. I'm not a big believer that you can have perpetual growth, but they've got to find some way to keep it moving in the right direction before these investors start to ask for some leadership changes. Cameron D, I worked in systems implementation. The condition issue is definitely a VP made a promise that tech couldn't deliver situation. It always is. Yeah, and that could be. And for my part, now I've not worked in that particular field, but I've spent enough time in like business management that you shouldn't announce something until you're confident that you have the ability to implement it. I don't know. That just seems like a 101 thing to me. It's okay to get on, a show like this, like David Lee did a few months ago, and talk about things that you're thinking about trying to do, but to say, we're going to do this and we're going to do it by X date. If your technical team or whoever, the marketing team or whatever group is involved, isn't on board and hasn't made the commitment that they can actually do it, is a real problem. And it sets you up for situations like today where people like me are saying, hey, look at eBay, struggling once again. Den Decor Depot, USPS announced stopping some shipments from China, but since has walked it back. Its consumers digesting the news cycle sent tons of offers everywhere. Yeah, there was a post yesterday. Some packages, not flats, not letters, but packages were going to be held. They weren't going to be accepted coming from Hong Kong and China. Obviously, the only effect that would have potentially on us as resellers is if you've ordered something from over there. Otherwise, it's probably all good because some of that cheap Temu stuff probably can't get here. But if it's already been rolled back, as have many of the things that have been announced over the last couple of months, in particular the last couple of weeks, maybe it's all back to normal over there. I don't know. Miss Lachey, good morning. I have something lined up for you. Were you able to figure out how to use your, what eBay calls spendable funds for your shipping labels? You had commented in another video, and I had replied to that I thought you would be able to do that. And I do have some stuff stored here on the screen. If you did not figure that out, I'll be happy to show you that scenario. Den Decor Depot, I looked, and every shipping supply I've bought has come from Mexico or China. That's interesting. Obviously the tariff thing that was on is now off again, at least temporarily I think it's been postponed for 30 days. So we'll see how that goes. But those, Mexico and Canada in particular, from everything I can gather, are our 2 biggest trading partners, followed closely by China. And implementing tariffs on all of those things has the potential to really be disruptive, even for small businesses like us, if you're buying kind of shipping supplies and whatnot, no pun intended with whatnot, from shippers that are in those countries. That stuff could all get more expensive. So perfect, outstanding. Lord Jake Ryan, USPS reverses its decision to suspend inbound packages from China and Hong Kong. They updated the news a few minutes ago. There you go. I have not been on the news since like 7 o'clock this morning when it was still in force. So there you go. That is off. Let me know. What do you feel about the eBay shenanigans over the last couple of days? It has been quite messy over there. We talked about on the Monday show the changes over at Etsy. That did also elicit some interesting responses. Etsy eliminating the ability to add handling charges into your shipping fees starting in March. Again, a way for a company to potentially claw back a little bit of gross merchandise volume in a limited way for a very short time. So we'll see how that goes. Let me know what else is on your mind out there in reselling land. I am just drinking water this morning. As I mentioned, the coffee had me over the edge yesterday, so no bueno. Taking the day off from the coffee. What else is going on out there? Let me get back in here and see if there's anything else we can cover. Pardon me while I move some windows around. eBay sellers are continuing to look for listings on Facebook Marketplace. We talked about that a little bit over the last couple of weeks, and there hasn't been any change there. Nobody's seeing their ads or their listings over there. And again, Liz asks, how much longer will the Chief Technology Officer, Mazen Rawasheda, the Chief Product Officer, Eddie Garcia, or the Chief Communications Officer, Gigi Gantra-Duff, and the rest of the executive leadership be allowed to blunder down the same path before eBay's board of directors finds themselves facing another call for change from investors? So there you go. Den Decor Depot says spring update comes early, working on going flat rate on Etsy this weekend. What is anybody else doing over on Etsy, making changes to how you handle shipping? I never added a handling charge, so this is not going to impact me at all. But let me know if you did do that. What actions are you going to take? Are you going to switch your shipping and just do flat rate and include it there? Are you going to change the price of your item, which is what Etsy is hoping for, because they don't count shipping in their gross merchandise volume. So they're certainly hoping that you'll just adjust your selling price rather than throw all of it into a flat rate shipping number. Have you seen any good sourcing deals yet? I haven't actually been looking for much. I bought kind of towards the end of last year. I did that big 1,800 book purchase, and then I fell into those 500 odd religious books that I'm working my way through, which put me in a position where I had 2,500 odd items or more in my garage that I was trying to work on. So I haven't even looked at estate sales or anything so far in 2025. That's actually on my agenda for tomorrow. I am going to take a peek and see if there's anything cool going on in my area. But so far, I've not gone sourcing yet in 2025. Let us know in the chat. Have you found any good deals? Have you been out sourcing? What do the sales look like in your area? Lord Jake Ryan says, I did not have a handling charge. I will not be changing anything on Etsy as I'm handmade and have free shipping over $35. Yep. I don't know how much money really will even be involved there. I don't know how many people do like the handling charge or add extra. I feel like much as Den Decor Depot said, you would just bake that into your price and do flat rate rather than, because again, the psychology of it is you go in and you look and you see, okay, then it's tax and then it's shipping and then now it's a handling charge, and it just starts to be, even if the total dollar amount isn't all that bad, it feels like here's a charge, there's a charge, charges for everyone. And it can definitely impact buyers' willingness to make a purchase. And again, a part of me feels like the cost of supplies is part of my cost of doing business. That when I buy bubble mailers, that's not something I should necessarily be passing on to customers. It's part of my cost structure in doing business. Michelle Schenk, not raising prices, didn't have handling. I think that's going to be a fairly common sentiment. I don't know how many folks did. Den Decor Depot, I'm working on a big bulk buy for March, but man, I'm really nervous about it now. Just because sales are slow, I'm always, again, a big believer in the, ultimately it's a numbers game. The more stuff I can have and have listed, the better off I'm going to be. The last 5 or 6 days, again, for me, have been super, super slow, relatively speaking. Instead of doing, 12 transactions a day, I've been doing 6, which is, that gets your attention. They've been decent for the most part, but it is definitely, and again, we're in that time of year and there's a lot going on with, the news cycle. Like you mentioned earlier, people are watching the news and they're a little nervous about what's going on with the economy right now. Miss Lachey says, I'm sourcing very little these days. If it's not an almost guaranteed sale, I'm passing for now. That makes sense. And that's, for a lot of folks, that's always good practice, especially if you're part-time. You don't want to clutter up your storage or consume your time and effort listing items that are not going reasonably quick flips. So I completely understand. They should have just put a cap on the handling charge. That where you get into the question there is what Liz brought up and what I talked about in the episode on Monday. If this is a kind of underhanded way to try to tweak some gross merchandise volume by getting sellers to put that into the price of their item so that they can count that as part of their sales, because remember, shipping is not something that they count. Putting a cap on it would not have achieved that goal for them. It would have made more sense really from an operational standpoint. But if that was the goal, without having been stated, was to goose the gross merchandise volume a bit, that would not work. And that may be why they chose not to do it that way. Miss Lachey says, I'm digging through my death profit pile, and finding stuff in my house to supplement for now. Yep. And again, that's kind of the same reason I have not been out. I had a significant amount of inventory. It's cold and nasty out. I don't want to be trying to haul totes full of books from an estate to my SUV when it's, cold and snowing and whatever, if I've already got 2,000 odd items that I can work from. So I just haven't been out. But this weekend, I feel the need to get out of the basement a little bit. Lord Jake Ryan says, life is better if you don't watch the news. Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely is. I've seen a lot of people posting on Facebook that they're torn between their urge to stay informed and not be very depressed by what's going on in the world. Then Decor Depot says, after using Depop and Mercari for a while, I'm adopting their flat rate costs for shipping, and I'm just not moving much on listed price. As for the big buy, more up is always better in long tail. Yes. Yeah, I always, again, especially in media, it only takes one person to be looking for that book. I just listed a book moments ago before I came over here to the studio for $90 that there's only one listed on eBay. And here's an interesting, we'll kind of go down a tangent of talking about product research. So I got on eBay, there's one copy of this book, and it's listed for like $200 plus shipping. And anytime there's only one, I get a little skeptical about what the pricing model is that was used to come up with that. So I went over to Abe Books just to double check. And of course, there's 2 or 3 over there at around $90. So the guy that's on eBay, now again, you could make the argument that maybe a buyer on eBay is not going to go look at Abe Books. They're going to really want this book, and they're going to be willing to pay the $200 for it. That is a thing. But my thing is, I want to be competitive in the broader market. I looked at some other sites and I see that $90 is kind of the number. So now I am less than half the price of the other guy. I own the book for 38 cents. If I sell it for $90, I'm going to be over the moon with that. So trying to judge where and how you price your items to be competitive on whatever site it is, and considering again your costs and what it's going to cost to ship and how you handle shipping, all of that stuff factors in. But it does pay sometimes to do a little more research. That guy that's trying to get $200 for that book may sit on it for a while because there are other ones out there. And now there's one on eBay out there for significantly less money. So Big Dre, my 90-day total is down 50% compared to fourth quarter sales, but I still haven't sourced or listed since December. I might start this month. Yeah, and again, as all eBay sellers will tell you, that listing activity, sending offers, doing whatever, doing something, relist, relist to trigger the algorithm that there's activity on your store can help soften kind of slow times. But I think everybody is kind of experiencing the same thing. And again, historically, I look back, February is never a great month for me. And then as tax return time starts, things tend to pick back up. So I'm not particularly panicked about February being super soft at this point. But it does get your attention if it's down 50% to the previous quarter. Kathleen, good morning. Happy to have you here for a live. Thanks for coming out. I know 11 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday is probably not the most convenient time for everyone, but here we are. Media Picker says, I have a crap ton of media to list, but also just bought 3 lots of CDs in bulk from eBay, totaling about 225 CDs. There you go. And again, I'm never opposed to having more rather than less. There comes a point where you just physically can't handle anymore and you got to slow down. But when I find a good deal, I usually will try to pull the trigger. Like with those religious books I bought a couple of weeks back, I was not really in the market for books. I was actually looking for something else on Facebook Marketplace. But because I had previously searched for books, that listing popped up. And of course, it looked like a good deal on the face of it. And I inquired and it turned out to be a great deal. So I went ahead and bought them, even though I really didn't need them. So yeah, there is that. Ms. Lachey says, it's amazing what you find when you start cleaning and organizing. Yeah, it's like when you move, you find stuff that you had forgotten that you even had, and then you'll put it in another box and forget after you've moved again. But yeah, doing a big spring cleaning, getting ready to do a move, you find all kinds of stuff. I'm the guy who like hoards all the old cables from like every electronic device I've ever owned. And then at some point does a cleaning and says, you know what, I haven't used this cable in like 5 years. I'm going to get rid of it. And then the next week I need it for something. Cameron D says, my sales last weekend were abysmal. Mine were not abysmal, but they were definitely off. Normally, my Monday when I go to the post office is anywhere from 30 to 45 packages. This week it was 25, so it was down, but it wasn't abysmal. But since the weekend has been really close to abysmal. It has been very, very tough. And I've seen sellers, again, in some of the Facebook groups, commenting they've now gone 2, 3, 4, 5 days without making any sales. So I know it's not just you. It's everybody is feeling this right now. Media Picker currently down 11.5 this year compared to the same time last year. I'm still up a bit, but I've given quite a bit of that back so far in February. January was really good. February, not so much. Lord Jake Ryan says, how are your mercari sales? Sold 9 things on there this year with about 1,150 listings. That would be about my experience. I've probably sold, I'd have to go back and look, but less than 20 with 9,700 listings. Now, books are not a big category on mercari. It's just not something they focus on. They're really not that great at it. They're listing information. I mentioned before, they don't have a category for history books. So there's a lot of problems trying to sell books over there. But yeah, it has not been great. I've not seen a big increase since the change in the fee structure. I know some sellers have said that they noticed that sales seem to be getting a little better. I've been flat for coming up on a year since they made the initial change when they did away with seller fees, which at the time they had said was forever, never pay selling fees. And less than a year later, they were back. Media Picker says, going up north this weekend, thrifting with Lord Jake Ryan. There you go, to cherry pick some items to add to my store. Good thing I have a week off coming up. Might even add a few to mercari. There you go. Yeah, that's right. You took some time off between the new job. That's awesome. Whereabouts are you heading for the little sourcing adventure? Miss Lachey says, to Media Picker, do you buy CD lots that need to be resurfaced? That is always a big question for media sellers. Media Picker, let us know in the chat. I think if my memory serves me correctly, you do have a resurfacing machine. Then Decortipo says, my ASP is way down, but my volume is up. Mine has been, again, really pretty consistent. You might have a week where one jumps and the other one kind of tails off, but on balance over the course of time, it has been very, very consistent, even across multiple platforms. I don't see big spikes. To be fair, I'm not finding that I get a bunch of, I do a bulk buy, for instance, and I get whatever, 500 books. There are some in there that, end up in that 50, 60, 80, $100 range, but I'm not generally speaking finding $8,000 books. Just not really what I'm finding in those lots. But Mary McQueen says, I've sold 17 things on Mercari this year, but definitely more on Poshmark. There you go. Haven't seen a big bump with the fee change either, but staying hopeful. As I say all the time, it's better for all buyers and sellers if there are more places to buy and sell. So I hope Mercari is able to figure out and be successful. I hope they find their niche, whether it's the obsessive collector that they're looking for or whatever the case may be. Speaking of obsessives, there was just an announcement I just saw a little bit ago, and I don't have it here, but Whatnot supposedly just suspended a trading card seller who has like 87,000 followers for some comments that they made on their Whatnot show. We'll probably be covering that in the episode coming up next Monday, but it is the one you got to be cautious when you're doing live selling. You see people, especially the ones that are like super high energy, sometimes they get off on a bit of a tangent and you can say things that maybe you shouldn't say. They've not been very clear about what took place on that show. The article I read did say that there was a general consensus that a suspension was warranted for whatever was said, but that's a massive, massive trading card seller that has been suspended over on Whatnot. Media Picker says, most CD lots, there's always some that will need to be resurfaced. Most sellers won't go into detail on the condition of each disc, except some that need cleaning or even pitched. Yeah, I usually, having spent 20 plus years really in the record business, I can generally tell by eyeballing where the cutoff point is for a disc that's likely to play and likely not to play. And the ones that are not likely to play, I just discard. I don't do enough CDs at this point to justify the cost of a resurfacing machine. I had thought about it at one time. I've not ever come across anything that was so high value that would have offset the expense of one of those. But it is, I know some sellers swear by them. I'm pretty sure Resale Dojo does resurfacing as well. And it does, the ability to do that does open you up to being able to buy a much broader spectrum of items in terms of what their condition is. I tend to, again, I've not bought any CDs in a long, long time, but it's not something that I have ever done. Media Picker says, I do have a CD cleaner. Use the JFJ Easy Pro. Costs around $200 to $250. There you go. How often do you have to buy whatever the solution? I don't know what that system works like, but I know there's some kind of solution that you have to put in to do that. And what's the ongoing expense for running that roughly per disc, if you have an idea? I'm always curious how much people spend to refurbish anything, but particularly media. Big Gray says, FedEx is going to cost me a $70 pair of boots because the package is late and eBay is forcing a refund in 2 days. It's not just FedEx, man. I feel you. I've got a couple USPS shipments that, again, have been tied up. Cincinnati has been particularly bad. There was a big article in the news a couple of days ago. Indianapolis is really, really behind as a regional hub, getting items moved, seeing a lot of tracking that just says in transit to next facility, and then there's just no more scans until the item physically arrives where it's going. Really, really big struggles with all of these shippers. I'm surprised. I don't know how late the package is for you. I'm surprised eBay is forcing a refund in that short of an amount of time. But it's you wish they were a little more supportive of sellers when there are obvious tracking and shipping problems across all of these shipping companies. It's not specific to any one, unfortunately. Then DeGore Depot says, just got a $58 Etsy sale. Thanks. Yeah. See, Etsy is awesome. It's not, for me as a media seller, primarily in books, it's not big volume. It's 12, 15 sales a week compared to 80 to 100 or whatever over on eBay. But it's typically, it's better net margins, better gross margins, higher average selling price. So there are some advantages to that kind of stuff being over on Etsy. I wish Etsy did anywhere near the kind of volume that I'm doing on eBay. That would be fantastic, but it's just not ever worked out that way. Mary McQuain says, the Big Dre, I hope it shows up before that happens. Yeah, I would try to stall that as long as possible. Media Picker says, the solution can last for months, talking about the CD cleaner. Pads can go pretty quickly depending on how many you're cleaning. Pads are about $60 for 5 of them, and the large bottles of the solution will run about $30. It will last 4 months. So that's not bad. If you can clean hundreds of CDs, is it actually a resurfacer or is it more of a cleaner? And can you tell by looking whether your particular machine will fix a disc or whether it's just beyond repair? Usually my experience has been if the scratch is so deep that it's into the metallic underlayer, especially if you can see through like a pinhole in the metallic, that is shot. But if it's surface level, a lot of times those can be repaired. Watching YT, I think that says, now that Trump is talking about taking over the Gaza Strip, do you think that could affect sales for eBay sellers nationwide? I don't know that particular thing would impact sellers for any reason, but I think in combination with all of the other things that are going on with tariffs, with the kind of uncertainty with the federal payment systems and with IRS, there's an article yesterday that tax refunds might be delayed because part of the program that they're trying to implement is they're trying to get some IRS agents to take early retirement. You've probably seen those memos that have gone out where they've, the fork in the road thing, and they want agents at the IRS to take early retirement while they simultaneously have a hiring freeze on at the IRS. So that could potentially, if all that comes to pass, they say, tie up people's tax refunds. Well, tax refund time is typically a pretty good time for resellers because people have some extra disposable income. So these things all, maybe any one individual one, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily have a big impact, but cumulatively, I think they have most, and you can let me know in the chat what your opinion is. I think cumulatively, they have people nervous. They have people concerned. The stock market's been kind of up and down, not fantastic, not awful, but there's some doubt about what's going on. And anytime you introduce doubt and uncertainty into any kind of business market, you have the potential for things to really tend to lock up. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. It's one of the reasons, despite it all being gloom and doom, I do keep an eye on the news because it can affect your business, and you've got to be cognizant of how you want to handle your cash flow. Do I want to make an effort to list more? Do I want to hoard some cash just in case things get really soft and I need to pay bills 3, 4, 5 months down the road? It's really, really a difficult situation right now. Politics aside, just the general level of uncertainty can be really problematic. Lindy Moo, good morning. Sales blew up yesterday, but I was off for a month from Christmas. But congratulations on the sales blowing up. It's funny because I was at the post office this morning with my little bag. I only had, like I said, 6 sales from eBay. And the guy's like, that's the smallest bag you've brought in a while. And I'm like, I know, it's slow out there. And from the time, my post office is literally half a mile from my house. From the time I left there to the time I got home, I had 4 orders on eBay. So it all kind of comes in waves, unfortunately. 4TP says at Media Picker, I see it on Amazon. Thanks for the recommendation. Do you recommend the protection plan? I assume you're talking about on the cleaner. They classify it as a repair machine. It can remove deep scratches to an extent. I can tell just by looking at the disc if it's worth cleaning or not. I threw out about $600 of CDs at cost last year. Ouch, that's a bunch. Although to be fair, I do the same. You buy, again, these big lots. It's part of the cost of doing business. You're going to get some duds, some stuff that's damaged, and you write them out of your inventory and you move on with life. Again, not a tax accountant, but that is a deductible expense. Cameron D, markets hate instability. Absolutely. The markets don't like it at all. And that can trickle down to, the average buyer who, is already squeezed on both ends. Wages are not really increasing super fast right now. Inflation is slightly under control, but in some areas, grocery prices are still going up. It's been, if you live in kind of the northern half of the U.S., it's been a particularly cold winter, so your utility bills may be higher than normal. I know mine have been. So again, all of that stuff can have a cumulative effect, and you don't necessarily think about it as a reseller. You think, I'm going to list this dress on Poshmark and it's beautiful. It's going to be a huge hit and it's going to sell right away. And the person who finds it that would have bought it has an extraordinary expense or an exceptionally high utility bill that month, and they can't. And that kind of stuff does trickle down even to people like us that are really, really small businesses. Media Picker says the plan is a good idea. If there's an issue, you can ship it back to the company for free, I believe, and they'll repair it at no charge. If they can't repair it, they will replace it, which is always a good deal because a lot of that stuff's not repairable, or it's not, I guess I should say, it's not economically repairable. Like a lot of electronics today, it's not, it costs less to just hand you a new one than it would be to fix whatever's wrong with the one, like on a TV or whatever. So there's a lot of that where they just ship you another one. Big Dre says to Mary McQueen, thanks. Yeah, they opened a case just a day ago. It was due January 28th, but nothing yet. Yeah, that seems awfully quick. Depending on when it was, if it was only due January 28th, they will allow, again, this is just my experience. As long as I stay in communication, I go in every couple of days and update that request with a note to the prospective buyer about the tracking or whatever. For me, it has been up to 30 days past the due date, to the point where on, knock wood, over 25,000 items sold across multiple platforms. I've only ever had one thing that did not ultimately get delivered, which is remarkable. We like to complain, justifiably so, about how slow and how much drama is involved with some of these shipping companies. But at the end of the day, and again, just my personal experience, for the amount of stuff I have shipped, to have only had one item that I had to refund because it never got to where it was going over the last 5.5 years is a pretty remarkable track record. 4TP says to Media Picker, thank you. I appreciate you chiming in, Media Picker. It's one of the reasons I do these live, so you guys can chat amongst yourselves and learn. We're all learning together on these things. I say it every week, I feel like, but I appreciate the community that has developed around here. Media Picker, at least it's a write-off cost of doing business. Absolutely. Absolutely. Mary McQueen says, Big Dre, what a bummer. Yeah, hopefully they get that fixed for you. Big Dre says, I filed my taxes and hope my refund comes quick. Yeah, it would be one of the advantages to filing early, particularly if you are going to be getting a refund, because I think things could really get backed up. If you wait until April and you're due a refund, I think there's a real likelihood that you might be waiting quite some time to get that money. It was interesting also, eBay's 1099 forms, man, they came out right under the wire. It was very late on the 31st. Interestingly, I noticed they were all dated as though they had been processed on the 24th, but they did not make them available to us, at least to me, until very late in the day on the 31st, which is the very last day that they have the ability to do that by law. Callie, hello. Thanks for coming out. Hello to all. Ryan M. Dreyer. I have a $400 sale on Etsy that had taken too long to get to its destination. It shows being delivered today. Yes. I've had numerous, I talked about, I had essentially an entire shipment from New Year's Eve day that got tied up at the Cincinnati hub for the better part of 20 plus days. No scans, didn't even get its acceptance scan. I dropped mine off at a small post office. They don't even deliver mail out of this office anymore. It is strictly a drop-off location. One guy, that's all. And he scans the acceptance sheet, and they don't get scanned again in my town. They go to Cincinnati, and then they ultimately get their final acceptance scan and then move on from there. All that day's shipments were lost in Cincinnati. I filed, I think, 14 missing package claims, and as is usually the case when you do that within 2 days, everything was found and moving again. So there's something else if you haven't done that. I don't know if FedEx has something similar, but the United States Postal Service, that has worked for me every single time. If you have a package that hasn't gotten a scan in 7 days, send that missing package request to USPS, and almost always in less than a week, they find it and it gets on its way to its destination. Mary McQuain says, oh my gosh, don't even get me started on electric bills. I think they accidentally charged me for the other apartments attached to mine as well. Yeah, no, I can imagine. Mine, I'm on even billing to avoid like major catastrophe, but I always look at my invoice to see how much it actually was. And last month was one of the most expensive I can ever remember. It was really, really high. So no good. Mary McQueen says too, Ryan Dreyer, fingers crossed it shows up today. Yeah. And I think I talked about a couple of weeks ago, I had somebody that left feedback, neutral. So whatever, feedback that they hadn't received their item. It was 2 days past what the original due date was because it was one of those that had been lost in transit. But the morning they left the feedback, tracking showed that the item was physically out for delivery. So I could go on a rant about that, but I think I already did that. So we'll let that one go. Brian Henry, good morning. Snowing here again. We're not calling for snow. They're talking about freezing rain in my area for tonight into tomorrow. So I would prefer snow, to be completely honest. Freezing rain, there's not much you can do with, even if it's all-wheel drive in your vehicle. When it's ice, you're not going anywhere. Michelle Schenk says 1099 showed up after 10 p.m. on January 31st. Yep. Yeah, they were cutting it awfully close. Brian Henry said eBay 1099s, 2 of mine arrived early. The third came in just under the wire. That's interesting because I hadn't talked to anybody previously who had gotten one early. I'd seen a lot of people complaining about not getting them on time. So interesting. Kevin Wallace, welcome. Good to see you. Bought a JFJ Easy Pro 2 years ago, and it has worked well, although I'm more of a bookseller. I am as well. If I ever did another big, like 8,000 CD lot, like I bought, what was that, 4 or 5 years ago now, I would probably consider purchasing one. But it just, opportunity has not presented itself for me, and it's not something I'm looking at. Media Picker, or Kevin, you as well. Have you used this on DVDs or games, and does it work on them as well as it does on CDs? Brian Henry, agree about the snow versus the freezing rain living west of Seattle. Yeah, right. It's fairly flat here. I could probably get around, but this cloud belt, if I'm reading that right, gee whiz, shipped out a $27 stuffed animal yesterday and got returned this morning on eBay. How is that even? Ay. It can't even have been delivered yet. How can they be requesting a return? People are something. I use the Easy Pro on DVDs. It's worked perfectly well. I appreciate that feedback because the DVDs, my experience has been, can be a little more sensitive to skips and such from scratches. So that's interesting. Mary McQueen says, you're probably not even a couple of hours from me. We have a winter weather advisory tonight for freezing rain. Yep, same. Where are you at, Mary? What part of the... you're in Ohio, if I remember correctly. Right. Yeah, that's just crazy to me. That is totally a remorse return. I mean, there's no other reason for it, but frustrating. Absolutely. Works on DVDs and games also, says Media Picker. Find the best results with CDs where the light marks are hardly noticeable. Does it leave, like my experience with these machines is from like the early 2000s, where it left a visible, almost like a spiral pattern on the disc where it was quite clear that it had been run through a machine. Is that still the case, or do they end up polished and looking like essentially brand new? We're asking a lot of questions about this PHP machine. If you have an affiliate link for Amazon, drop it in the chat. Maybe you make some money here. Powell, okay. Yep. That's up north of Columbus, or in the Columbus area, if I remember right. Media Picker, freezing rain here, starting about 7 tonight. Winter advisory. Yeah, that seems to be the trend. Brian Henry purchased an Easy Pro years ago when I emptied a storage unit with about 700 DVDs. There you go. Again, those are kind of the prime opportunities that would cause you to think about purchasing one of those. When I did that 8,000 CD buy, those were almost all from a record store. I bought them actually from a record store, and they were from multiple other record stores. So they'd already been kind of culled through for the ones that were going to be damaged beyond repair. So I really didn't run into many that I had to discard for being damaged, which was really fortunate. If you're buying from an individual, or you're buying on eBay, or you're buying on Facebook Marketplace, your mileage is certainly going to vary. But having bought these from a record store that was just trying to get out of CDs, it helped with that because they had already done that kind of heavy lifting on those, which was awesome. Kevin Wallace says it works great on DVDs, appears to work on games, but I have no way to check them. Yeah, it's one of the reasons I've kind of started to stay away from games. I don't have the equipment or the desire to own all the equipment that would really be needed to properly check all the games. So I've just kind of stopped. Mary says north of Columbus. I used to live in Columbus. I lived just outside of German Village in the mid 80s. The Columbus is darn near unrecognizable from when I lived there. It is crazy how much that area has grown. Delaware and Columbus are going to merge, I think, at some point. Lord Jake Ryan says it sometimes does leave a circle pattern on the discs. Kevin says they look very good usually. And Media Picker, not really spiral, faint scratches shown under a light, but otherwise overall pretty clean. Sometimes the machine can be a pain. Need to make sure the pad has quite a bit left and solution is on good. Is this one of the ones? I assume the lid closes so that the solution isn't like spraying all over the place, because that stuff can be kind of a mess, as I recall. Who else is selling CDs? I see a lot of stuff kind of in the news. You've seen this trend over time. Physical media making a comeback there. I've seen a lot of kind of like the audiophile community having a renewed interest in CDs as a good format to have. So if you are a CD seller, this may be a good time, or if you're not a CD seller, it may also be a good time to think about getting into it. I haven't really looked at pricing. Media Picker, you can let us know in the chat. Are you seeing prices start to come up? Because I know there was a long period of time there where a lot of your kind of just frontline, normal, popular CDs were $2-3, maybe free shipping. It was a really, really tough business to make any money in. But there seems to be a trend back toward physical media, and in particular CDs. We've already seen kind of the resurgence of vinyl, which is quite expensive, especially new vinyl. But CDs, I'm seeing a lot of people talk about making kind of a comeback. Media Picker has a YouTube video on how I use it. There you go. Check out Media Picker's channel. Cloudbait says, sell physical CDs and whatnot. Decent amount of classical music CDs. Those buyers were always I feel like they never really jumped on board as much with the Spotify, Pandora, YouTube music trend, classical music buyers. Um, Man, I'm old enough, and I remember like the Telarc CDs and the Deutsche Grammophon CDs that were just the first time you ever put one of those on back in the 80s and listened to it, the quality of the sound was just mind blowing, absolutely incredible. Brian Henry says sold both a CD sealed this morning and a specialty VHS about cowboys. Specialty VHS seems to still do well. I talk about the railroading and the train memorabilia. Those VHSs do pretty well because there's a fairly good percentage of that stuff that never got converted over to DVD. I see people talking about horror VHS, in particular, vintage like 80s horror VHS tapes selling like crazy and bringing really good money. Miss Lachey says, I sell CDs, cherry pick as I don't have the machine. That makes sense. Yeah. When in doubt, I don't sell it. And same even with the books. If I'm in doubt about what the condition is, if it's got, obvious moisture damage or whatever, and I just don't feel like it's an item I can justify selling, I just don't. So watching YouTube, selling CDs is still not an easy niche when folks expect high-end sales per item. Yeah, and it's the same, to be fair, in books. Like my average selling price overall is about $18. But that's a lot of books that are $4.99 and $5.99 that are offset by ones that are $79 and $89. But you have to be realistic about what the price of your item is. An Alan Jackson CD from the mid 2000s is probably not a $90 CD. There's just too many of them out there. But if you can find those categories that are still bringing good money, my experience has been like death metal, black metal, obscure punk, some of that stuff can really pop. So Media Picker, you can chime in. Here we go. Prices of CDs are coming up. The demand is growing in part because of the greedy record companies with vinyl. Sold a handful of CDs between $100 and $300 last year. There you go. Yeah, if my memory serves me correctly, there are only a limited number of vinyl pressing facilities in the United States. And if I remember right, one of them caught fire within the last couple of years. So there is that kind of demand versus supply thing that has caused some of that pricing issue. But yeah, some of the prices on new vinyl is just crazy to me. Mary McQuain says, my new car didn't come with a CD player, so I bought a portable CD player to listen to Christmas music. So there are lots of us who definitely haven't jumped on music streaming. Yes, I'm old, she says. I'm the same. I think I told this story, but when I had my CD and record store, 2000 to 2012, was summer of 2012. Spotify was just coming to the US. I'm like, that's probably a good time for me to consider getting out because I can kind of see where this is going. And I was sitting at the counter and I had the door open because it was a nice day. And a kid walked right by my shop listening to music on his phone, not even on headphones, but through the tinny little speaker on his phone. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to compete with that. And that was when I made the decision to get out while the getting was good. Vinyl had not yet really caught back on. If I could have hung on another couple of years and ridden the wave of the vinyl resurgence, I'd probably still have the shop, to be honest. But it was just that window from 12 to like 16 that my spidey sense just said that was not a wise use of my funds. A long term is a nice niche, says watching YT. Kevin Wallace, for me, I just use single small drop of the solution and 1 squirt of reverse osmosis water. This way there's really no mess to clean up inside the unit. And yes, the cover does close neatly. Playroom, hey, just got here. What is up with the eBay update? Yeah, we just talked about that at the beginning of the show. It's a mess. It sounds like if you're talking about the clothing piece of the update, that's going to roll out over the coming weeks. If you happen to be over in the UK and you're talking about the private buyer protection fee that's supposed to go into place, they announced they're going to try that again tomorrow. They tried that yesterday and apparently it didn't turn on. So they have announced that is going to go live on the 6th, and pretty much everything else that they're working on Looks like they're going to try to roll it out as we go through February. My experience with eBay is when they do these phased rollouts, it creates some confusion, which is something else we talked about here, some uncertainty. Some sellers will probably get it. Some buyers will probably get it before others as it rolls through the system and updates. So all I can tell you is to keep looking. And when those changes finally pop up for you, you'll need to go in again if you're a clothing seller and make those edits. If my memory is correct, they have said that anything that you currently have listed for clothing as used is going to go into the pre-owned good category, which may or may not accurately reflect what that item actually looks like. So if you've got a bunch of used clothing, you're probably going to have to do some consideration about making some edits on a potentially not insignificant number of listings once that finally does go live. Mary McQuain says, I did sell a Nightmare on Elm Street sealed VHS and was happy with that. Probably should pay more attention to those. I'm always on the lookout for particularly sealed, but any like horror VHS, again, especially those older ones. My understanding is most of them could be big money. It's not something I would necessarily just grab and walk away with, but I would definitely take the time to comp it at the sale. Brian Henry says VHS horror, wrestling, yep, trains, field dressing, deer, and other unusual topics. Long tail for sure. As is the case with most media, you may be waiting for one buyer a year to come along that's interested in a particular item. But if you have it listed and listed at a competitive price with a good listing, you're likely to be the one that sells it when that buyer comes along. It's, again, to go back to the book that I talked about earlier in the show, I could have priced mine closer to $200, but I run the risk of somebody who, it's a very unusual book that someone might do more research on beyond eBay. And if they go to another site like AbeBooks and see the exact same book for $88, $89, $90, they're not going to buy mine on eBay for $200. They'll buy that other one. So all of those things have to factor in. Again, that's just my opinion, sitting here in the bat cave, to your pricing model, and whether something is worth listing and sitting on for some length of time. Lord Jake Ryan, if money is tight, $13 a month for Pandora or $13 to $30 for one CD. Still think not everyone is going back to CDs. No, and I agree. That ship has sailed. You're going to see, I think, a nice burgeoning collector's market, but it's never going back to the way it was. Physical media is never going to, again, in my opinion, outperform streaming because of that very reason. For $13 a month, I've been a premium subscriber to Spotify since 2012. I have access to virtually every song known to man. I wish they treated the artists better. I wish the labels were a little more fair with the artists. But to have all of that music available for that price a month, you just can't justify it. Although, to be fair, and I probably have said this before, pick a song, any song on Spotify and listen to it. And if you have a CD of the same album, put it on your CD player on the exact same audio system and listen to it. And it is night and day, the difference. The audio quality of these streaming services, even in their higher levels, does not, to my ear, begin to approach what you can get on a CD. But from a cost benefit analysis, I'm with you. I can't justify $12, $15 a pop for an album when I can get it for essentially nothing on streaming. Mary McQuain, the underground metal definitely sell really well. When I see those listed on Facebook Marketplace, I always try to snake my way in there, but most of those guys know what they've got. They can be very difficult to snag out of somebody's hands. I was fortunate that big buy that I did, whatever it was, 5 summers ago now, there was quite a bit of that in there that I ended up buying for pennies a piece as part of a bulk load, and that was fantastic. And those brought very, very good money. So I'm always kind of on the lookout, but they can be pretty difficult to get. Media Picker, were those CDs extremely rare? I assume you're talking about the ones that were like multiple hundreds of dollars. Brian Henry says CDs, I get them in auction lots in bulk, cherry pick some, and pass the others on to my son-in-law to make bundle fodder. Yeah, again, a common media practice, be it books, movies, whatever, building bundles, same artist, same genre, whatever the case may be. You've got a bunch of stuff that's fairly low value that you don't want to mess with individually. Build a lot of 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever the number is that makes sense, and throw them up there. And in most cases, you'll find a buyer. Media Picker says to @watchingyt, yeah, no sold comps. One was a sealed hair metal EP, unknown band that I got for 39 cents in a bulk eBay lot. Another was an obscure 90s hip hop, also unknown artist. Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff from like the 80s and 90s, especially in hip hop and rap. There were a lot of kind of small, almost underground labels. Some of the old, like original No Limit stuff can be really, really good. Again, first pressings, just like with books, we talk about first printings and first editions all the time. If you can find an original copy of some of this stuff, particularly if it's sealed, there can be some crazy, crazy money. Doesn't necessarily have to even be all that rare, although in a lot of cases, a lot of those are pretty difficult to find. Mary McQueen says 4 years is a long time to just hope you can make enough money to eat, so I don't blame you. Yeah. This next run of time is going to be interesting. Playroom says weeks, bastards. Guess I'll quit bothering them then. Watch this on playback. Awesome. Appreciate that. And again, as always, I appreciate everybody that came out today, spent a little time, and contributed to all of our growing knowledge. Media Picker says horror VHS can go for good money, especially the B horror movies. Yep. And again, there's a lot of that stuff that probably never made it to DVD, which obviously increases its value. Playroom says classy background. I had somebody ask me a couple of weeks ago if I had read all those books, and I was like, no, but only because it's actually a fake vinyl backdrop. I do have a lot of books, but those are not real. Then Decor Depot says, thanks again. Time to sell. It is. We're a little over an hour, so we'll wrap this up here in a couple of minutes. Brian Henry says, agree. The higher the listed price, the more likely a serious buyer will research the market. So it's a balancing act to pick price. And again, you've got to try to factor in, and it can be hard on, if you're looking at books, for instance, on Abe Books, because a lot of those sellers don't put their own photos. They use just a stock photo or no photo at all. So you're relying on what their text description of the item is. Versus on eBay, at least in most cases, there's an actual photo of the book. So you can say, okay, my cover is in nicer shape. My pages are more or less tanned or whatever the case may be, so that you can kind of get a fair assessment. But it's one of those things you really, especially on a more expensive item, it pays to do a little bit more digging so that you're priced right across a broad range of markets. Media Picker says streaming quality isn't as good. Also, an artist can pull their music off there at any time. We've seen that. Taylor Swift had done that at one time. CD is more of a collector market, and they'll pay good money in many CD collector groups on Facebook. And that's always a good place to be, because you can kind of tout your own business quietly, not like spammily, but Big Dre says, I've been planning on buying a few albums on CD, maybe like 20 for my personal collection, but haven't got around to it. Check out Media Picker's store on eBay. Brian Henry said, had a rare CD with no eBay comps, priced it at $89. Now, months later, there are several, and my competition has a sealed at $29. And again, that will happen. It's the same. It's kind of what I just did with that book. I look and I see where the top of the market is, and I'm into my book for 38 cents or whatever. So I don't necessarily need to get, I'd like to get the top, but I don't have to. So I try to price where I think I'll get that first sale. But over time, more people come in and they do the same thing, and you see the price just continue to erode. It's one of the reasons, especially on your more expensive item, it definitely pays to go back in maybe once a month and kind of recomp all that stuff. Take a look. I got this book at $200. Has the market changed? I've got a couple of books that when I picked them up, the comps were $300, $400, $500, and there were sales at that amount, and mine did not sell at that amount. in anything like a short order, and the more of them have come onto the market and the price has eroded. Now down, there are listings at the $149 range. So I adjusted my price again to be competitive. So this isn't, I'm not a big delist and relist kind of person, but I do keep tabs on those more expensive items to make sure that I remain as competitive as possible. And that's definitely something we should all do. Cameron D says, have a great week. Brian Henry, always price a bit higher than a listing with stock photos. Absolutely. The ones with no photos at all, I typically just completely ignore. What are your thoughts on selling media on Discogs? I think they actually do great business over there. If I was selling a ton of it, I might consider it. My experience is I know some guys that have both bought and sold there, and it seems as though their buyers can be a lot more demanding, finicky about condition than what I have found to be the case when I was selling on Amazon, for instance, back in the day, or on eBay. Record buyers in particular, just as a breed, can be very persnickety about condition and grading. But Discogs it's a very, very targeted buyer and seller group, and they can be really, really tough on grading. So that would be my only caution there. You need to be really cautious about being accurate with your grading so that you don't end up with a dissatisfied buyer. Whether it's justified or not would be another question. But that just seems to be the atmosphere over there. Brian Henry says, CD, exactly. Dropped my copy to $29. Ensured I had a better picture and description. Media Picker says, Discogs is definitely more for collectors. If you sell, undergrade the item, which is a practice that I've talked about here. I do that all the time. If it's very good, I'll generally grade it good, and so on. And if you go through my feedback, you'll see all the time. I just got one the other day. Book is actually way better than expected. So that under promise, over deliver is always a good mantra. Brian Henry says, I list fewer CDs these days and like sealed units, but prefer CDs to reel tapes. I just sold a blank reel last week. It was a small, like, I don't know, 3.5-inch reel, very unusual piece that I picked up at a yard sale for $1. Sold it for like $14 or something like that. There is still a market for some of that stuff. But yes, reel to reel is very antique, shows our age. With that, my friends, as always, thank you so much for coming out on Wednesday morning and spending a little bit of time participating in the chat, helping each other out. It's always good to see. Next show on Whatnot will be Friday night at 7 o'clock Eastern, vintage, science fiction, and fantasy. And then I'll be back at you next Monday with a recap of all of this week's reselling news. Until then, it's time to sell. Thanks, guys.